With the release of Dragon's Dogma 2, Capcom had the opportunity to add cool new features to the game that the first didn't have. But on the flip side, they also decided to remove some features with the jump from 1 to 2. Today, I'm going to cover 10 of these. And to be clear, this isn't a hate video. I love both games, and just because the first game had things the second didn't implement, does not make the second game inferior. Overall, I'd say I'm happy with the state of Dragon's Dogma 2, and as a fan of the first, would say it's a worthy sequel. Anyways, let's get started with the first thing Dragon's Dogma 2 ditches from the first, and that would be the vocations in Dragon's Dogma 1 to Dragon's Dogma 2 are largely the same. However, a glaring difference is the lack of a second set of inputs. In Dragon's Dogma 1, you had 2 sets of moves bound to each of the bumpers by default. This was removed from Vocations with the launch of Dragon's Dogma 2. It ends up making combat feel a little more limited than the first game. However, they did add multiple built-in moves to each of the Vocations, so it slightly makes up for it. Nearly all of the Vocations in Dragon's Dogma 1 had 2 weapons at their disposal. Out of all Vocations, only the Warrior, Mage, and Sorcerer had no secondary weapon to swap to or use. However, in Dragon's Dogma 2, every Vocation has access to only 1 weapon at a time, unless you count the shield on Fighter. But seeing as it doesn't have its own set of skills, it would kind of be a stretch. The Eternal Fairy Stone was an item that you had from the beginning of the game if you had Dark Arisen. The Fairy Stone never gets spent when teleporting from place to place. This allows players to spend very little time unnecessarily running and walking from place to place. This seems like a purely bad item to get rid of with the release of the sequel, but I'm going to have a little bit of a hot take here. I think it was for the best. The world of Dragon's Dogma 2 is 4 times the size of the first, and the size doesn't take away from how dense it is. The map should be explored on foot, and fairy stones should be a luxury. On top of that, ox carts offer an effective and fast way to cheaply move around the map, and if you're smart, you can learn where monster ambushes occur on the route and use it to disembark before you reach the endpoint of the cart's journey, allowing you to essentially skip a good portion of backtracking. Throwing items were a nice, but niche set of items in Dragon's Dogma. They almost never outshine any skills, but they added some good options if you didn't want to use stamina or lacked some coverage. Throw Blast could work against enemies weak to fire, and if you combined it with a bottle of oil, you could create a very effective way of torching enemies. And that's just one example of throwing items and their uses. There are a couple more, but I doubt it would be entertaining to go over all of them. Healing springs were a semi-rare area in Grancis. There were a total of 3, spanning the top of the map to the bottom. Basically, there was 1 for each area of the map. They healed your health, restored stamina, and cured any and all debilitations. You could even bottle the water and use them to restore health to your whole party. I think out of all the items on the list, I'd most like to see this one return. Not because they'd be useful, which they would be, but campfires do what healing springs do but better and are more frequent. But I'd like to see them return because they add a nice sense of magic and mysticism to the world. The stamina in the first game seemed far more forgiving and unforgiving at the same time. The stamina increased with every level and could let you have a massive stockpile of stamina. However, this is a double-edged sword. While you may have had a large stamina reserve, it also takes an extremely long time to regenerate. Let's just say I'm happy with the stamina system changing, and I think it was better overall. Stamina in Dragon's Dogma 1 regenerated at a fixed rate, versus how it regenerates in Dragon's Dogma 2, which is percentage based. Your stamina will take the same amount of time to regenerate at a high level versus when you were a low level. Merchant idols were a unique and rare item in Dragon's Dogma 1. Coming in 3 varieties, bronze, silver, and gold. These can be found or earned through various methods, but the end goal of collecting these is to gift them to a merchant that is looking for them. Once given, the merchant's items change, depending on the rarity of the idol you gift them. If this were to have been added to Dragon's Dogma 2, it could give a great reason to travel the map. And even better still, I think these could be a good random item to add, as the idol could spawn in various places around the map, making it a little treat when you find it.
Stop! He's already dead!
The numerous amount of quests in Dragon's Dogma 2 make the game feel alive. Additionally, some quests are time gated or on a time limit. This adds some urgency and allows the game to be replayed many times. However, one feature that seems to be missing is the quest board. In Dragon's Dogma 1, there were various quests you could accept that would reward XP, gold, or rare items. Some items were seemingly only obtained from completing these quest board missions, and they were also missable, meaning if you weren't paying attention, you could miss out on some helpful items in the early game. I for one never did these when I first started playing, but when I returned they helped me level up and afford new items, or outright earn them. Very helpful. The Loss Gauge is a unique mechanic in Dragon's Dogma. I can't think of one other game having this sort of healing. It adds tension and resource management to the game. While I think it's a great mechanic, I could understand why it could be annoying to some people. The way it worked in Dragon's Dogma 1 was very different though. You could fully heal past the Loss Gauge, but only through curatives and healing springs. The Loss Gauge only affected healing spells, which I think is a little more fair. You would think that in a game called Dragon's Dogma, that there would be many types of dragons, but Dragon's Dogma 2 left behind wyverns, undead dragons, the dragon, and the worms. Although a more accurate version of the worm was added to the Unworn world in Dragon's Dogma 2. And of all the items on the list, this has got to be the most unimpactful removal of all. Simply put, small characters were able to travel through goblin holes in certain areas. Basically useless, but it was kind of funny. Little goblin arisens. And there you have it. These were just some of the items and mechanics removed from Dragon's Dogma 1 to Dragon's Dogma 2. Some changes are for the better, but some of these should definitely return. Maybe in the eventual DLC? That being said, what would you like to see make its return? Something big or something small? Leave it in the comments. I'm eager to see what everyone thinks of fondly from the first game. But that's going to do it for now.
Bye bye.